I'm going to be talking. I'm going to be speaking today just about three things, which is really around augmented reality and AI in particular, machine learning, blockchain on behalf of Jamie Leonard, if someone can let him know, and a couple of other advances that we're seeing. I've just come back from Vegas, which was for the HR Tech Show, so I've had a look at probably roughly looked at about 700 pieces of technology in the last week. Next week I'll be in Amsterdam for HR Tech. Anyone who doesn't have a ticket and fancies going to Amsterdam for a few days, come see me. I have a few where I'll be emceeing. So I get the opportunity. I'm really a recruiter. Ultimately, I'm a recruiter or recovering recruiter. It's been quite a few years since I last got somebody hired. But what that means is, although I work in the technology space with organisations over what they integrate and implement and their methodology, and with startups on product and marketing. So that's kind of what I do. I'm a hybrid of things. I don't really have a real job. But I get to spend a lot of time looking at trends and trying to figure out what's happening. And what I'm seeing at the moment, particularly within recruitment and talent acquisition, is the period of time we're going through. So I'm looking at discussions, I'm going to debates, I'm hearing people talking, and this is the main thing I'm hearing. The algorithm's going to get you. The artwork for this, by the way, is by London Subdued. It's all available. If anyone wants to go to Monty's Bar, you can buy the originals. Also available on T-shirts and mugs. So the algorithm is going to get you. What I'm seeing is what I'm calling the resistance, right? Permanent resistance, which is resistance to technology and change through fear. And whenever we've gone through any age, we have to look at it and say, what's kind of interesting is whenever we've gone through any age, there's always been resistance. People have always said, man can do that better. Didn't matter whether it was steam, didn't matter whether it was electric, didn't matter what we did. The interesting thing actually about this change, if we consider this to be the digital age, the age of digital technology, is every time we've had an age when we went from steam to electric and so on, every time we've had what we call an age, first of all, the age has lasted about 100 years. It's taken about 100 years coming around. Nowadays, we probably change the age we're in about every 12 months. The second thing is, whenever there's been major changes in society in the way that we do things, and we've introduced automation or technology in some way, whether that was invented in a printing press, spinning jenny, however far back you want to go, productivity has always soared. We've always got better and faster at doing what we do. In the digital age, this is the first time we've had a major change in technology and got less productive. So I think we're at a challenging time. We're at a challenging time where we've got to figure out what is it we're doing with this stuff and what do we actually want. Right? That's the challenge that we've got, and how do we get to be better? And it's quite simple. I think this point about the algorithm is there's two things we've got to do. Firstly, we've got to believe in the algorithm. Ultimately, we've got to believe in the technology and its ability. The second thing is we've got to make sure when we're building algorithms or using technology, we have enough data to put into it, and we have an idea of what good is. That's the two requirements. The two requirements for operating anything driven by an algorithm, anything from matching technology and so on. The two key things you need is enough data for machine learning to make sure you're clean, enough data that isn't biased, that gets rid of old practices. This is where I think the challenges come. Because the more that we use technology, the way in which we're buying technology at the minute, and some of you will be responsible for buying tech, I think we're doing the wrong way. And I'll give you an example. Whenever we look at matching technology, say matching technology that matches people with jobs and jobs with people, we always evaluate how effective it is against people. There's always a blind test. We'll take 20 of our top best recruiters, they'll do a match, we'll then do a match with the machine and see if the two overlap. See if that's cool. So what does that mean? What that means is we're not really bringing improvement through technology. What we're doing is actually taking all the bad habits we have as humans and putting them on apps. We're building volume. So one of the things we need to rethink when we're looking at process and technology now, if we're going to be in the age of algorithms, we're going to use machines to do stuff, don't evaluate them against the performance of people. find a different way of doing things. It's the opportunity to change stuff and do things better. Because if what you take is a biased data set to find your high performers, for example, and use that to match, all you're going to end up with is taking a certain group, a homogenous organisation, certain group of people, and only select those people by machine without any human touch. So that's the first challenge I think we've got, is we've got to decide what good is. What would be good for this organisation, and can we reimagine it? Is what we're trying to do just take our process, put it on a machine? Because that's really what we've always done in talent acquisition. The way we used to work was on paper. It was on paper. When I started out, I can remember, who here remembers having a fax machine in the office? Because had a fax machine. That's good to see, because anyone who can remember a fax machine in the office is a digital immigrant. We came to this stuff, we didn't know how it worked. And we designed the processes which have resulted in us failing, predominantly. And this is why, because when we worked on paper, if I wanted data or information about people, somebody had to come and physically give that to me. It had to be in a document, a piece of paper. And I can remember people coming to my office and having to fill in forms, physically fill in forms, and I'd put that in the filing cabinet. I would keep that paper for 7 years. Not because it was really useful, but the law said I've got to keep it for 7 years. And I would keep it in a filing cabinet for 7 years, and I would never look at it again. You'd come in for a job, I'd have a look at it. Do you get this job? Yes, no, and I'd stick it in the filing cabinet. When the filing cabinet was full, I'd go and buy another filing cabinet. And I can remember one time being in an office where we had to reinforce the floor because we had so many filing cabinets of paper. And that was the error that we made. But then we moved to the digital age and we started getting emails, we started getting things like job boards, more and more people started applying for jobs, we started dealing with bigger volumes. What we also did as organisations was, rather than getting better at the things like attraction, we became magnificent ship magnets. We became really good at attracting all the people who were never going to work for us, and then needing to put them somewhere. As a result, we built bigger and bigger funnels. We just got more filing cabinets. We put more and more information in and never really used it. Never really used it for any purpose. We just made sure we built a bigger, the top of the funnel just got bigger and bigger and bigger, while the bottom of the funnel was still the same size, which made it harder to get to people. That's where I think we've lost the efficiency. Then when we went to mobile, we did exactly the same thing. We took our paper and we stuck it online in an ATS, and then we took the ATS and we stuck it on a little screen and said, yeah, we want you to fill this in. We created recruiting processes built on technology which were designed to repel people rather than attract them. How can we not get the right people in the funnel? Because all we did is we copied everything we did on paper and just did it with technology, which meant we did it on scale and volume much bigger than we were used to. What we now need to do is actually look at it and say, this is the opportunity to do something different. This is the opportunity to reinvent and let the technology do the groundwork. So, what does that actually mean? I see it as meaning something pretty simple in terms of how we're working, and that is figuring out what do we want to do. What do we want to do with our process? I think there's 3 things you've got to look at when you buy technology, right? Very, very simple. 3 things you should consider. Forget the bells and whistles. Forget the fancy buzzwords. The 3 things you've got to look at in evaluating technology today is, number 1, customization. Can I make this work for me? It's great out the box, but can I make it work for me? Can I change it? Can we? And that's usually a mixture of branding stuff. Can we change the colours? Can we do things like that? And can we integrate this properly into our workflow so that data flows in one direction? And are we adding on? Big trend we saw last year. A lot of organisations I was talking to were asking me about CRMs and ATSs. So, right, interested. We want to get a CRM now. First question I'd ask is, what drives the CRM? And the answer was usually the ATS. Because for me, where does hiring start? Hiring starts where you create the job. That's my workflow. Where does the job come? If you're creating the job in the ATS, you're kind of going backwards to your recruitment marketing. That's a great example of us using technology and trying to wedge it in to an existing workflow rather than going, maybe we should change the workflow. So the second thing I think you've got to look at is workflow. How does this change what we do? If this technology does not change what we do, don't buy it. You're just being a thrill seeker following a trend. So how is this going to change the workflow, and what's going to be the effect on the users? When you're considering users, you need to consider candidates, recruiters, really consider what the recruiter experience is, and look at it and say, okay, if we're going to change our workflow, let's change our workflow. Have we changed everything around it? The third thing is training. How easy is this? If we're changing the workflow, how easy is this to change? And training very often is about things like, if we give an example of, if we're using an algorithm, or we're using matching, or we're using reporting, we all want analytics, right? Who in this room doesn't have enough dashboards? Kind of interested in that. Who doesn't have enough funnels to look at and all that kind of thing, instead of one, right? But who actually really understands what that funnel means? Who understands what it means? And more, we're bringing people into recruiting and talent acquisition roles and giving them reports, giving them graphs, giving them funnels without the framework or the apprenticeship to understand what that means. I was very lucky with data because I always ran my businesses on data. I ran a lot of recruitment firms, and I ran them on numbers before data was a thing. And how we used to work is, if you sent a CV out, you made a phone call, you did anything like that, you drew a 5-bar gate, right? You started drawing a 5-bar gate, and we added them up at the end of the day. And I'd come back to you and say, what have you done today? And you'd say, oh, I've done 10 of those. My mind would say, 10 of those? That doesn't sound like very many. You'd say, yeah, but the reason I haven't done 10 is because this happened. I go, right, I get that. So the first one was we had conversation about the activity. We didn't just look at a report. The second thing is I got my calculator out. For anyone who doesn't remember what a calculator is, it's an automated abacus, right? Just to give you an idea, which grew up and became a spreadsheet. So this is where we started out. I started out actually having to work out what's the activity, what's the efficiency, what's the result. And because I did those calculations, I understood what that chart meant. If it was going up or going down, then we introduced big data as a concept. And what do we do? What's the best definition of big data? How do I take numbers and turn them into pictures so idiots can understand them, right? And that's generally what we did very well. So then, now I look at it and say, do we really make sure we understand the process and the methodology behind the technology we produce, behind the analytics, the reports, the flows? So make sure, start looking at it and say, do we really understand what goes on? I think in your organisations, for everyone from hiring managers to recruiters, you should have a data driving licence, which means you can't unlock a report till you've done a bit of training in the basis of it. But actually making sure that when we understand the workflow, we understand how this works. And the next bit is just looking at things like interface. We've all heard, anyone who is going to be the Uber of recruiting will be removed from the building. And Uber's maybe not a good example. It's a bit like saying Rolf Harris is my role model or something. It was pretty cool once, but maybe not right now. And I think, and what I think we've got to look at is say, but actually, what can we learn? What was different? What was different with Uber? What was different with Airbnb? What did they create, and where do we believe we're going with all technology? And that is, they created marketplaces, create connection points between people who wanted something and people who had something, so that they could connect directly without the use of a middleman. This is where technology is taking us, right? And that's why I'm using the Uber example to really say to you, right, think about it. How do we connect the curious, the job seeker, the ready, with the opportunities and the brands that we have, while working in a legal framework? How do we do that and make the middle piece frictionless? That's the challenge. So when you're looking at technology today, keep that in mind. Because I believe once you've done that, once you start taking that challenge, you can and you will be successful.